Poor Catherine Parr, the final queen of Henry VIII, lived a life marked by duty, love, betrayal, and tragedy. But her misfortunes didn't end with her death. Instead, her remains endured centuries of neglect, shocking discoveries, and even outright abuse. From a tranquil burial at Sudeley Castle to being unearthed, inspected, and treated with appalling disrespect, Catherine's posthumous journey is both heartbreaking and fascinating. Let's explore the incredible story of how a Dowager Queen's final resting place became the centre of such an unbelievable series of events, and how she ultimately found peace once again. The Dowager Queen Catherine Parr, wife of Thomas Seymour, 1st Baron Seymour of Sudeley, died in the early hours of the 5th of September 1548 at around the age of 36. She'd given birth to a healthy baby girl, Mary, on the 30th of August, but she suffered with postpartum complications, probably an infection. And in an age without antibiotics and good postnatal care, she just couldn't fight it off. Catherine died at her husband's seat as Baron Sudeley, Sudeley Castle in Winchcombe in the Cotswolds, and she was laid to rest on the north side of the altar in the chapel in the castle grounds. It was a beautiful chapel, and her tomb was topped with what was described by Victorian historian Agnes Strickland as a mural tablet of sculptured alabaster. There she lay in rest for a time, but then the English Civil War happened. The Sudeley Castle website explains that King Charles I found refuge there when his nephew Prince Rupert established headquarters at the castle, and that this led to Oliver Cromwell ordering for the castle to be slighted, that's to say, for it to be deliberately damaged, after the defeat of the Royalists. The castle was badly damaged and fell further and further into ruin, its chapel included. Catherine Parr's tomb became lost. In May 1782, a group of ladies visited Sudeley Castle to explore the ruins of the chapel. While examining the north wall, they noticed a large alabaster block and speculated that it might have been part of a monument that once stood there. Curious, they began digging in the area and soon uncovered a leaden container just beneath the surface. Opening it in two places, they discovered human remains, later identified as those of Queen Catherine Parr. Shocked and frightened by their find, they quickly ordered it to be covered by earth once more. However, later that summer, John Lucas, the tenant of the land, unearthed the coffin again. According to contemporary records, he found a leaden coffin or chest at the depth of about 2 feet. Lucas removed the lid, expecting to find only bones, but to his surprise, according to a contemporary record, he found, and I quote, the whole body wrapped in 6 or 7 cerecloths of linen, entire and uncorrupted, although it had lain there upwards of 230 years. His unwarrantable curiosity led him also to make an incision through the cerecloths which covered one of the arms of the corpse, the flesh of which at that time was white and moist. It must have been quite a shock for him. The sealed lead coffin had prevented the remains from decomposing. Lucas also noted that the coffin was inscribed KP. Here lieth Queen Catherine, wife to King Henry VIII, and the wife of Thomas, Lord of Sudeley, High Admiral of England and uncle to King Edward VI. The coffin was then left alone for a year, and when it was dug up again in the summer of 1783, it was described as quite fetid and in a state of putrefaction, due to air having got into it. However, Mrs. Julia Brocket and her son, who were present, examined the remains and coffin before Mrs. Brocket ordered a slab to be placed over the grave to prevent any future and improper inspection. Sadly, the coffin was opened again in 1784, and this time, according to Agnes Strickland, the royal remains were taken out of the coffin and irreverently thrown on a heap of rubbish and exposed to public view. The body was said to be dressed in costly burial clothes, including shoes, and an eyewitness said of Catherine, all her proportions extremely delicate, and traces of beauty were still perceptible in the countenance, of which the features were at that time perfect. The remains were reinterred, but just 2 years later, in October 1786, they were exhumed and examined by Reverend Treadway Nash. He recorded the face was totally decayed, but that the body was perfect. He noted that the Queen must have been of low stature, as the lead that enclosed her corpse was just 5 feet 4 inches long. And that's not the end of it. 6 years later, in 1792, according to Frederick Brooksbank Garnet, writing in 1893, the tenant occupying the castle permitted a party of drunken men to dig a fresh grave for the coffin. Goodness knows how they treated Catherine's remains. In 1817, Reverend John Lates, rector of Sudeley, decided to try and find Catherine's remains once more. According to Edmund T. Brown, an antiquary from Winchcombe who helped the Reverend, Lates found the coffin bottom up in a walled grave. They exhumed it and took it to the Chandos vault, where it was cleaned and examined. By this time, all that was left of Catherine was a skeleton, along with a few pieces of cerecloth and some hair. Although they first thought the inscription had disappeared, further cleaning revealed it. The coffin was nailed back together and was found to measure 5 feet 10 inches in length. It was then placed on 2 large flat stones beside Lord Chandos in the vault. Following the purchase of the castle in 1837 by the Dent family, restoration work began on both the castle and the chapel. Brooksbank Garnet explained, the ancient chapel, which had been desecrated by the Puritans, was thoroughly renovated under the direction of Sir John Gilbert Scott, and a handsome decorated altar tomb surmounted by a Gothic canopy was erected on the north side of the sacrarium to the memory of Queen Catherine Parr, whose effigy was rendered as correctly as it could be from the portraits which are extant. A plate with an engraved facsimile of the coffin inscription was attached to the pillar next to the west end of the tomb. Finally, Catherine was at rest. Her tomb in the chapel can be seen by visitors to Sudeley Castle today, and relics taken from Catherine's coffin, including locks of her hair and a tooth, can be found in a display case inside the castle. Catherine Parr's life was one of resilience marked by personal sacrifice and devotion. Yet, even in death, she faced trials no queen should endure. From being exhumed multiple times to being exposed to public view, her remains were subjected to shocking indignities over the centuries. Thankfully, Catherine now rests in peace at the restored chapel of Sudeley Castle, where visitors can honour her memory and marvel at her story. And I've been to the castle and to the chapel, and her tomb really is beautiful. And the display case is a bit strange, but there you go. Have you been to see her? What did you think of Sudeley Castle and the chapel? Do share if you've been to Sudeley Castle. Oh, don't forget, you can pre-order my forthcoming book, On This Day in Tudor History 3. Yes, there is a 3rd volume. I've got that many Tudor history events for you. You can pre-order it for just $2 at claireridgway.com and enjoy early access to the book. The January and February sections can be read right now, and also you can enjoy a video talk on Tudor Christmas from me as well. So the bonuses and goodies for you waiting on claireridgway.com. Oh, and do remember to give this video a like if you've enjoyed it, and consider subscribing to my channel. See you soon. Bye bye.